Hello, this is Adam. Welcome to my Rare Classic Car channel. Today, something a little bit different. A 1981 Yamaha XS1100 Special bike. Don't know if anybody out there is a vintage motorcycle fan, but I thought I'd post this video since this bike has been in my garage, kind of back in the corner for some time, and it admittedly needs a little bit of work to get back on the road. The gas has gone stale. I coated the tank when I was last driving it, so that shouldn't be an issue, but needs fresh gas. I need to rebuild one of the petcocks. It's leaking a little bit. Have to go through the carburetors. But I did dig it out and washed it up and thought you might enjoy. So, as I said, it's a 81 XS1100 Special. It's got 5,600 original miles on it. This bike in its day was one of the top sport bikes, kind of in an era where the Japanese bikes were coming into their own and starting to dominate, taking the crown away from British bikes like Nortons and Vincent's and things like that. Really, which started with the Honda CB750 when that came out in, I believe, 1969. Certainly in the late 60s. But the Honda was just a beautiful sewing machine-like motor, extremely reliable. And if you drove a British bike like a Triumph or a Vincent or a Norton before that, or BSA, they were not known for the reliability that the Japanese bikes were. I remember one time I was actually riding this bike around town and somebody on a Vincent Black Shadow came up and I thought, gosh, that's a gorgeous bike. And then I kind of chuckled to myself internally. I'm surprised that it's running, being that it's a British bike. And as I was thinking that in my mind, at the stoplight, his bike stalled, and he had to push it off to the side of the road. And it was a beautiful, beautiful, pristine bike. That's not to rag on British bikes. I've owned British things over the years, including a 95 Jaguar Vanden Plas, which actually was a nice car. Last year, second to last year of Jaguar's own 6-cylinder, which was an excellent motor. But nonetheless, this was an era where the Japanese were just kind of trying to outdo one another. So there was the Honda CB750, there was the Kawasaki, I believe 1000, there was this Yamaha XS1100, there was the Honda CBX 6-cylinder inline. The earlier years had Kawasaki 2-strokes, the H2 Widowmaker, of which I have one that I also have to fix up. I really just don't ride that much anymore ever since I have a young family. Whenever I go someplace, I need to have places for more than one spare passenger, and I don't know that I would be a spare passenger on a bike like this for a long time. But in any case, this bike is about 90 horsepower, so by modern standards, not a ton, but it would do the quarter-mile. Cycle World tested one of these in late 1978, and it would do the quarter mile in the high 11s. So it was not a slow bike, even by modern standards. It's just not a bike that's going to break into the 10s or even high 9s like they have today. But it was really a killer bike for the time. 1100cc, disc brakes, twin disc brakes in the front. You can see with slotted rotors. Does have a disc brake rear, shaft drive as opposed to chain drive. Has 4 individual Mikuni carburetors, which I really don't enjoy taking off. You got to take all the linkages off and all the fuel lines, take the tank off to rebuild these. So one of the reasons why I haven't ridden it that much, because I have to do that, and I don't mind working on old cars like that. Oldsmobile, I rebuilt the Quadrajet in maybe 3 hours. This takes longer and is more tedious, harder to get parts. So I guess my interest has waned a little bit, although I do love these bikes. I also did last time replace these gaskets here, which often crack, and then you get vacuum leaks. The bike runs lean. It runs lean right now just because the carburetors need to be clean, and also the fuel's old. It's not helping. But inline 4-cylinder, transversely mounted, Like I said, shaft drive, so very maintenance free, no chain. That's my little battery charger. That's the helmet holder here. Does have automatic canceling turn signals. It's pretty surprising for the time, but if you go around the corner, they will automatically kick off. You don't have to cancel them. Just an all-around nice bike. Good seating position on this. By this year, they jetted the carburetors leaner after the bike's first year, and it makes it a bit cold-blooded, especially cold-blooded with old gas. And it really, until you get north of about 3,000 RPM, it's pretty boggy. And I've read Cycle World tests from back in the day when they tested this newer XS1100, and they commented on the same thing, that it's a big motor, but you really have to use a lot of throttle to get it going. And then all of a sudden, once you hit 3,000 RPM, it just takes off, and it's almost like there's a whole separate torque curve. I did try, when I rebuilt the carburetors last, to put richer jets in it, which I thought was going to help with the low speed issues, and it actually just gave me more power north of 3,000 RPM. So more work to do. I admittedly, like I said, just am not as passionate about getting this one back on the road because I don't ride that much anymore. I have the opportunities to ride, and I started riding about 20 years ago, back before there was a lot of distracted driving and there was a lot less freight traffic, and the roads, while they're still crappy, you know, were crappy back then, were not as crappy as they are today. Today, you know, the last time I rode this, there's just so much road debris that gets kicked up by the freight traffic. Freeway travel on a motorcycle now is almost brutal. And it wasn't, honestly, 20 years ago. So I got this bike, I think it had maybe 3,500 miles on it. And I put 2,000 miles on it not that long after I got it, and I've probably added, in the last 5 years, 50 miles, something like that. But really a nice piece. It has the characteristic Japanese sounding horn. And it does sound good. So let's see. Like I said, it's a little cold-blooded and it's on old gas, but it'll start up here. Actually started better than I thought. But you can hear it's missing a little bit. There it is, idling on its own. Also, it has the alloy wheels as opposed to spokes, so tubeless tires. If you ever get a chance to drive one of these Japanese bikes of the era, they're just really well made, very reliable, fun to drive. I actually owned my favorite bikes I ever owned. I owned a pair of Honda 350cc motorcycles. One was a 2-cylinder and one was a 4-cylinder. Both, I think, 1972 models, and I love those. I've had big bikes. I've had this 1100. I actually still own a BMW K1300S sport touring bike. And those Honda 350cc's were my favorite, and I sold them back in the day, and I kind of regret it because they were just sublime. Did they have a ton of power? No, but they had plenty of power if you wanted to go on the freeway, if you wanted to drive around town. They were comfortable, reliable. So these Japanese bikes of the, I'll say, late 60s to 1982-ish hold a special place in my heart, and maybe they do for someone else that's out there. So hope you enjoyed this little short video on my 81 Yamaha XS1100 Special. One thing I will say for those who are watching, you know I comment a lot about tires on old cars. If you have a motorcycle, I highly recommend replacing the tires even more frequently. Every several years that go by, I get new tires because I've had a blowout on a motorcycle, and it is not fun. It's scary, and I don't want to have one again. Thankfully, I've never spilled, ever. I'm a pretty cautious rider, but you want to do everything to be safe. Thanks for watching, and take care.